In the pulse of West Africa, where hope battles shadow, a regime thought unbreakable has collapsed. At 3:05 a.m., Abidjan streets thrummed with the low growl of military trucks. By dawn, the presidential palace stood bare, its flagpole no longer bearing Alassane Ouattara's colors. Ivory Coast's tricolor waved alone, a quiet rebellion against a long night. This was no mere coup. It was Ivory Coast, once a beacon of promise, now choked by years of rule cloaked in progress. For over a decade, President Alassane Ouattara held power, his charisma charming the world, his control strangling the streets. To global elites, he was a visionary. To the people, he was a lock on their future. Ivory Coast's awakening. The headlines roared. A tyrant toppled. But this wasn't just about one man. It was about the machine that lifted him, the allies who guarded him, and the soldiers who finally turned away. In 2012, Alassane Ouattara ascended as Ivory Coast's hope. A statesman with a gilded resume, backed by foreign capitals, he pledged prosperity. The world applauded. Markets surged. But beneath the shine, a rot spread. Elections were choreographed, dissenters silenced, wealth siphoned to loyalists. When his legal tenure neared its end in 2020, Ouattara bent the rules. A revised constitution, he declared, erased his term limits. The people marched. Batons answered. Opposition voices were jailed, protests smothered, and the youth, Ivory Coast's fire, were left with ashes of broken dreams. The West murmured, stability matters. The people whispered, betrayal stings. Whose peace was this? At what cost? Ivory Coast simmered, a cauldron ready to boil. The economy gleamed in reports, but markets told of empty pockets. Graduates jobless, hospitals bare, children scavenging instead of studying. Ouattara's regime leaned on foreign allies, their bases dotting Ivorian soil, their firms carving up cocoa and oil. The streets muttered, our wealth, their gain. That mutter became a chant, not in palaces, but in barracks, villages, and diaspora networks. Enough was enough. The storm wasn't brewing, it had arrived. When voices fade, the army listens hardest. Ivory Coast's military was both sword and shield, shaped by a civil war years before. Ouattara had molded it, rewarding loyalists, sidelining skeptics. But loyalty built on fear cracks. Young officers, born in the same struggling towns as their people, began to question. Why defend a palace while families starve? Why guard foreign interests over our own? Why silence poets instead of tyrants? Neighboring nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, had shown a path. Uprisings not for power, but for dignity. In 2024, a secret memo warned of rebellious currents in the ranks. It aimed to crush them. Instead, it sparked a flame. In hidden meetings on encrypted lines, a plan formed not for chaos but for rebirth. Ivory Coast would rise. Coups begin not with shots, but with silence. By early 2025, Abidjan felt unsteady. Ouattara's speeches dwindled. His presence faded. Whispers spread, was he ailing, escaping, or scheming? His aides called it scheduling. The army saw an opening. They studied past failures, Chad's turmoil, Sudan's stumbles. This would be swift, clean for the people. They mapped radio towers, secured power lines, tracked embassy moves. The plan, codenamed Operation Horizon, was precise. The signal came from within. A colonel, once trusted, now a spark of defiance. Now, the message read, one word, and the tide turned. History strikes fast. At 3:05 a.m., Abidjan stirred. Convoys moved through the dark, engines soft, lights dim. First target, RTI, the state broadcaster. Soldiers entered, no resistance. A captain, barely 29, spoke. This is not a theft of power. This is its return. The broadcast went live. Next, the Presidential Guard's base. Resistance melted. Many had switched sides. By 4:20 a.m., the palace was encircled, its gates open. Alassane Ouattara was gone. Spirited away, rumors said, by foreign allies days prior. His era of promises was dust. By sunrise, Ivory Coast's flag stood alone, guarded not by elites but by soldiers patched with a new oath. For the nation, the world gasped. Ivory Coast hoped. Villages tuned radios. Cities froze in wonder. Online, the diaspora roared. For once, fear gave way to possibility. When a puppet falls, the puppeteers falter. France called for constitutional order. Washington urged restraint. But Ivory Coast wasn't theirs to command. Mali hailed the move. Burkina Faso pledged solidarity. Niger offered aid. The African Union suspended Ivory Coast, but their words rang hollow. A question echoed across the continent. Whose democracy? Yours or ours? Chaos was predicted. Order emerged. The military council spoke from RTI, their tone calm, not warlike. No vengeance, only renewal. They vowed. A civic body formed, farmers, scholars, youth, no oligarchs. Schools resumed. Markets steadied. The internet stayed on, a rare choice. Two moves stunned the world. Foreign contracts faced audits, and foreign bases were questioned. We are no one's colony, the council said. In Bamako and Dakar, streets cheered. Not for a coup, but for its meaning. A continent standing tall. Murals sprang up. A soldier sharing bread. A ballot box breaking chains. One read, "No more shadows." It wasn't revolution yet, but it was a breath, bold and free. Ouattara's influence lingered. His allies fled. His wealth vanished abroad. Probes began. Billions siphoned, votes rigged, protests crushed. The people knew the theft. They'd lived it. The council promised no purges, only justice. A timeline was set. 6 months for a new charter, 9 for national dialogue, a year for elections, free, unwatched by foreign eyes. The boldest vow, no soldier would rule. This wasn't a trade of masters. It was a reset. Ivory Coast stood at a fork, not ruin but choice. Across Africa, minds stirred. In Accra, students asked, "Can we govern without foreign hands?" In Lagos, hashtags flared. Hashtag Ivorian Dawn. Thinkers wrote, "Not a coup, a rebirth." The council launched open forums, streamed live. Citizens demanded, "Where's our cocoa wealth? Why their currency? Can we trade with Africa first?" Answers were scarce, but the questions were power. A silenced nation was speaking. 1 year on, Ivory Coast voted. Not perfect, but free. A doctor, born of the people, won, no ties to the old regime. The military returned to barracks. The council dissolved. In Paris, deals were reworked. Bases shrank. Ivory Coast was Ivorian again. Artists painted horizons. Poets chanted of unity. Ouattara, in exile, was a shadow, a relic of an Africa that knelt. That Africa was no more. Ivory Coast's coup wasn't just a fall. It was a rise. Not one man's end, but a nation's awakening. Sovereignty isn't borrowed, it's claimed. And this time, it's Ivory Coast's forever.